I'm a photojournalist with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The year 2020 was a very interesting year for me as a photojournalist, but also a human being. It was very interesting to be out and about, knowing I was one of a few people that were out, considered essential workers, documenting what Atlanta was looking like, documenting what the state of Georgia was looking like during coronavirus. At the end of May, early June, I volunteered to photograph and document a George Floyd peaceful protest march that was happening in Atlanta. It was a peaceful protest and a peaceful march at the beginning, but once we got back to the scene and center, there was a bunch of conflict with the police officers that were there, and a lot of things kind of took place pretty quickly. It was the first time I've ever been in a conflict situation. I've never had training for that. So it was very interesting to be in a place where you really don't know what's happening. No one is really prepared. It's a bunch of emotion. And I think at some point, people should be angry. People should be mad at some of the things they've been seeing that have been happening year after year in this country. But at the same time, where is the line drawn? So it was very interesting covering that. During my time covering protests in Atlanta, I was detained by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources while covering protests in Atlanta. That was an eye-opening experience for me because instead of being treated as a journalist, I felt as though I was being treated as a Black person who was out of order. The summer just kind of became protests and coverage of COVID-19, and then Sequoia Turner, an 8-year-old, was shot and killed near where Rayshard Brooks was shot and killed, and that really touched me deeply. And so I reached out to the attorneys and the family and asked if I could cover her funeral, and they did grant us that opportunity, and I held that moment really close. I think that was the hardest thing I had to photograph this year. After photographing some of the protests outside of the Brunswick courthouse, I was able to take a portrait of Ahmaud Arbery's mother in Augusta. And the day I took that portrait, I got a call from my editor letting me know that we're going to be covering the John Lewis funeral. So I drove from Augusta, Georgia, all the way to Troy, Alabama to cover the funeral of John Lewis. And it was a long drive, but it was worth every minute of me drinking that coffee late at night to stay awake. It was a beautiful, beautiful sight to see so many people remembering the life of a man who was... Okay, give me a second. This year was really big for Georgia in the political realm. I decided that I wanted to cover politics in the state a couple years ago when Stacey Abrams ran for the gubernatorial seat, because I realized how important, or how historic, I should say, that momentum was. And it was just very interesting that that momentum brought itself over to 2020 during this presidential election. Covering politics has been very interesting in the state of Georgia. Growing up here, I never thought I would be in a state where, people are fighting for specific sides of the political divide. So covering the presidents coming down here, covering Obama, covering President-elect Biden, covering Mike Pence as he comes down here to campaign for President Trump before the election, and then after the election, covering the recounting of the ballots. How amazing, they say that frontline workers are heroes. I think the people that counted the ballots are heroes because they had to do it 2 times in addition to the first time. So it was very interesting seeing that dynamic. It was very interesting seeing people on bipartisan sides watching the people as they count the votes and trying to figure out if they're doing anything wrong, even if they didn't know what they were looking for. Like, how interesting is that process? And I thought it was really great that I was able to document that and be a part of that historical change of the state, turning from red to blue. I'm still now covering, as everyone knows, another election that's happening in the state. And it's been very interesting.